Hi, everybody. Dawn Zoldai here. This is the Dawn of Drones podcast, and I'm your host. So great to see you all back. We are in the middle of Industry Diversity Month, and I am so excited to have with us today Rob Corbett. Rob, I met him online. I was reading up on what he was doing, and I reached out to him, and this was a little ways back, right, Rob? And I was like, you need to be on my podcast. So great to have you, Rob.
No, thank you for having me, Don. It's always a pleasure, and anytime I can, share some experiences and stories with you in the industry is an amazing time.
Well, I also wanted to thank Volatus Aerospace, right? Because Rob is actually the third Volatus Aerospace Above and Beyond series guest, and they've philanthropically sponsored a whole host of folks across the year of this podcast, folks like Rob that are doing incredible things just like Volatus is. So thank you, Volatus. And a quick shout out also to Iris Automation, who has sponsored this entire month focused on industry diversity. We did kick off the month with Lori DeMatteis from Iris, a global vice president there. Go back, and if you didn't see her story, you got to listen to it. It's incredible. All of these, by the way, are on demand on DroneLife's YouTube channel. So anyway, who else do we have? I'm trying to think. I have my notes here. We've had just an incredible month so far, and we're gonna continue on. So Rob, let's go ahead and focus on you. So many people out there, they've heard of you, they know a little bit about you. By the way, everybody, if you missed our clubhouse last week, absolutely check that out because we got super deep into Rob's background. But just real quick, Rob, can you give us a little bit about your background before we jump into kind of all the amazing things you're doing for inclusivity and accessibility for the drone industry?
Sure. I started my career in the United States Air Force, and I spent 10 and a half years, traveling the world as a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, where we conducted criminal and counterintelligence investigations, full spectrum with all 96 agencies around the world. In 2016, I decided I was going to leave active duty, join a reserve component, and also had an opportunity to work with another federal agency, and I had a snowboarding accident in between that transition period, and fractured my fifth and sixth vertebrae in my neck, which rendered me quadroplegic. So I'm paralyzed from the chest down, and I do not have mobility function within my fingers, and then anything below my chest. But I can move my shoulders and wrists and things like that. I've always had an affinity for drones and technology, and I felt like it was a wonderful platform, one, to get back into just my love of aviation, but then also to teach others how to fly drones adapted and create more inclusivity within the industry.
Well, for those that don't know about the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, it's basically the Air Force's equivalent of the FBI. So federal law enforcement, also counterintelligence and criminal matters is within their purview and things of that nature. So Rob had a stellar career. He's very modest. He is a highly decorated military veteran. So Rob, thank you so much for your service. Just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And we share that Air Force background. And as a JAG, a military lawyer, I worked with the OSI all the time, and just an incredible relationship, between JAGs and the law enforcement folks in the Air Force. So again, thanks for everything you did. And I don't want to gloss over, your accident, but I also want to tell people that please go back and listen to the replay on Clubhouse, because we probably, Rob, if I recall correctly, we probably spent about 30 minutes going into really great detail on that and your personal journey and everything you experienced, during that time. just so everybody knows too, like this was about 8 days before the birth of Rob's daughter. And he spent months and months and months in hospitals between surgery and rehabilitation. And I want to, I want to talk a little bit about this idea that you use drones as therapy, really, kind of for yourself. Like, tell me, like the peace and kind of the hope that you found in getting back into drones, after your accident.
Yeah, it started as a really just a curiosity. You have a lot of time in your own head to kind of run through things and kind of plan out, what is it? How do I handle this next stage in my life? And with my affinity for drones prior to and aviation in general, I was looking at some of the platforms that were being released and some of the technology and how it had changed over the years. And I really felt like that would give me the opportunity to at least try and see if I could safely and efficiently manage flying UAS, small UAS. And luckily from there, I had a great group of people around me that had equipment that would let me utilize it, and I would just tinker with, you know, creating different attachments, creating a different adaptive controls for different drone controllers. So I was putting my hands on DJI stuff, Skydio stuff, Altel stuff, anything I could get my hand on, and just seeing like how can I interface with this controller. And then at the time, I was teaching technology for individuals with disabilities, and it just kind of cross flowed directly into, oh, this could be a vocation for other abled individuals. And this could be like a huge quality of life increase for some of these people to use drones as tools within industry. And that's really how the whole mission started. And I feel like it's been going really well, and I feel like the reception has been amazing. So many people within the drone community have amplified the need for this, and I really believe in it. So you know hats off to everyone who's supported this through the last a year and a half, almost 2 years now.
Well, Rob, you and I had a little back and forth. We all know, I hope we all know that the FAA's Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee report was dropped last Thursday, and 400 plus pages with attachments and chock full of information. But I'll tell you, something that jumped out at me was that piece about accessibility. And everybody, I emailed Rob and I said, you need to read this. It was about operators, remote pilot operators. And Rob, can you tell us a little bit about like what we read and how excited we were about that?
Yeah, so I was extremely excited when you sent me that article. I was just immediately went to like an ear to ear grin. But the verbiage was stating through some of the ARC study that the requirement for uh, small UAS or UAS operations beyond visual line of sight, they don't want to model it after crewed aircraft standards and requirements, which is huge because when we think about other abled individuals working remotely and working in the UAS industry, that is huge for someone to be able to, from a wheelchair in a remote location, operate a drone for whether it be agricultural, construction, mining, whatever the field may be. That is so huge. And it opens up so many possibilities for not just other abled individuals, but everyone. You think about like the accessibility. So when we look at requirements for general aviation, they're extremely strict, right? And rightfully so, because that's an extreme responsibility. But I think what I've discovered, and a lot of people in the industry have discovered, is drones are a different application, and they can be operated safely and effectively with some safeguards, even if you have a disability. So for them to say the verbiage is very much so it doesn't have to be like general aviation requirements, that's huge, and it opens up so many doors for so many people.
Yeah, and just to give everybody context, it was in the medical certification requirements that they were saying, hey, these same things don't necessarily need to apply and the example they gave, I thought, when you think about, in particular wounded warriors and veterans, they said, look, a UAS pilot doesn't necessarily need to use their feet. And so changing that requirement can open up, the aperture and allow amputees, as an example, to become certified drone pilots. And, Rob, you and I talked a little bit in Clubhouse. I do want to foot stomp this because, I think it's really important, this idea of even simple things that maybe most of us don't think about, like taking the Part 107 exam, can be a challenge for other able people. And you experienced that personally when you went to take that exam. Can you tell us a little bit about what you experienced and then, kind of what you did about that afterwards?
Sure. So, of course, when I was establishing my drone training program and working with students at the center, it was okay. How do I get myself in the test? How do I become, Part 107 to be able to certify and really have a grasp over what I'm teaching my students? And then how do my students with different disabilities go the same path, right? Um, and it really wasn't until I met some hurdles locally, but it was my students, I think, put so much emphasis on studying and getting really in depth, and we went over things at nauseum that their accommodations weren't really needed as much. But for myself, if you put a paperback book in front of me or a pamphlet like the Airman's Manual, and you're asking me to switch between pages and going over charts and things, and I only have a certain amount of time to do that, I struggle with it because I don't have the use of my fingers, and I'm trying to just go back and forth with pages, and it's so frustrating. You lose track of where you're at, what was the question, what you really get flustered, and it takes away from really just conveying your knowledge and passing it and being successful. And about really a few months after that, organization that I work with is a nonprofit, Drone Forward Incorporated, put out a internet release, and they were asking, hey, what are the accommodations for Part 107 testing? How can we improve on this landscape, and how can we better the community? And I immediately emailed Jesse Pacheco, the founder of DFI, and I'm like, I am here, and let's steamroll this thing. And from there, Jesse and I and the team at DFI, we just started coordinating with everyone that we had really built a relationship within the FAA and with around the FAA and some of the testing service providers, and just started talking with them and saying, we have someone that's reached out from us, and they're an amputee, and they want to get their Part 107. They were a pilot before they were an amputee. They want to fly drones now. Or, we have people who were college grads at very high level working in the industry, but can't get their Part 107 because they're not being accommodated like they were in college, right? So one example, we had a individual reach out. He was a UC Berkeley grad that's been working in LiDAR for a few years now, wants to get his Part 107 because it behooves him to move up into his positions at work and to try different equipment and to get, career building, but always been one question away. So
Yeah, that when you think about that, Rob, and this idea that even a limited accommodation to expand the time that people that need that time, like you just mentioned, your people like yourself or this individual from Berkeley. I mean, one question away, are you kidding me? Like, this is something I feel that is so easy to change. It's not like a humongous like infrastructure overhaul, right? It's literally like give them an extra hour. And colleges and universities are doing this routinely, for students. And why could we not do that? So I hope people are out there listening, and we're going to make some of these changes. So absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about we kind of mentioned, this concept of wounded warriors, but besides DFI, you also work with the Wounded Warriors organization. Is that right?
That is correct. So last year, it, it was really sentimental because I've had this wonderful spot here in rural Virginia that I've always wanted to do drone training at since I began this. And it is at the base of the ski resort where I sustained my injury.
Oh, I didn't know that, Rob.
Yeah, and I've been like, man, this would be a beautiful place to hold a drone training center. And so I got with Jesse at DFI and the team there, and I reached out to my local Wounded Warrior representative, Katie Schrecker, and was like, hey, I want to do a drone training event at this location with as many veterans that I can get and their family members. It's going to be really low key. It's going to be fun. It's going to get people interested in drones. And then from there, we can kind of expand on different possibilities and just give them resources on, if you want to use this as a tool in your job, sure, let's explore that. But if you just want to fly for therapy, we can explore that as well. So we had about 10 you know prior service members come out. They started the day building micro drones, learning basic flight operations with the micro drones. Then we moved into a drone builders or drone games where they were going through obstacle courses. And then later in the day, we were putting some hands on and giving them some exposure to some of the higher end commercial platforms and some of the enterprise platforms that we could get our hands on. And it was a success. Everyone enjoyed it, and Wounded Warriors felt like it was something completely different from what their normal events were. And it was, not only did it hit on the therapy side, the community side, but it also hit on the voc rehabilitation side.
I love that.
So it was a great event, so great that we're going to do another one here in Virginia, the end of May, early June. Still waiting on confirming some of those dates, their exact dates. But if you're a member of Wounded Warrior Project and you want to come attend our event here in Virginia with DFI and WWP, go on the post, which is their events calendar that they send out monthly, and just type in Virginia, and we're trying to lock in a date. But that should be happening really soon. And also, with that's expanded to, I've had veterans from other states reach out and say, hey, how can we get a drone event with our Wounded Warrior Project here in, our locality? And so that's kind of expanded.
Yeah.
The goal is to do another one in North Carolina this year as well.
Awesome.
Paul Rossi from 910 Drones has reached out, and he and I are going to work with his Wounded Warrior rep in his area, and we're going to see if we can, come together, collaborate with DFI, his organizations, and WWP, and make another training event.
I love that, Rob. And working with Paul, I'm sure is going to be amazing. He's doing so many great things out there in North Carolina. I'm so glad you guys are linked up. And speaking of kind of collaborations, I want to touch on something you said because you may not be aware of this, but and my company P3 Tech Consulting teamed up with Women in Drones and Marlene Dials at the Diversity Development Network of Canada, DDNC. We did an industry survey, right? Industry diversity survey last year. Those results summary are out on the Women in Drones website. By the way, Sharon Rossmark was our guest last week. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember that. Like in the beginning, I couldn't find my notes. I'm here, by the way, at Carasoft headquarters in Reston, Virginia. So I'm not in my basement with my normal like setup here. A little bit off kilter there for a second, but getting back to that, we're going to be doing a talk with the Know Before You Fly Your Drones workshop in Texas, April 2nd, Saturday, where Marlene and myself and Sharon are going to talk a little bit more deeply about those results. But I'll just tell you now, Rob, and it doesn't surprise me, given everything I'm learning from you, we did have a category identity group of, disabled, other abled, right, individuals as an identity group. And what we found was that group is very poorly represented overall, for sure in leadership. Now there were, if I recall correctly, at the worker level, maybe a larger amount than you'd realize. I'm going to have to go back and look at that now that we're talking about it. But um, with the challenges that you mentioned between not only just the testing aspect of Part 107, but the equipment and the fact that you had to modify that. I want to talk about that. So, because there's so many folks that dial in here that are like, in the industry that are drone pilots, remote pilots. Um, what did you have to do to modify your controller? I recall something about a 3D printer.
Yeah, so initially, and of course, my functionality since beginning my journey flying drones has actually improved. And I don't know if it's just that cognitive neuro function of doing something repetitive. But initially, I had to 3D print really just some buildups on toggles to where I could, successfully manipulate the controls, the aft and yaw and everything, and be able to truly have control of the controller. But how I fly is a little different because I can't hold the controller per se, but I fly with the controller in my lap or tethered to my lap. And initially, I was using 3D built up just clip on extensions over the toggles that made it a little bit easier for me to manipulate. They had some grooves that were 3D printed into them to where I could grab different corners with my digits and pull and go back and forth with buttons like the roll wheel on a drone controller to adjust, zoom or whatever the function set up for. I created a little 3D printed small teeth rocker arm that I could just bump back and forth to change that, and also too with some of the top button functions. Just some clip-on extensions that I was taking, and just I was able to bump at a distance, and it gave enough pressure to where I could engage the button. So nothing I was doing was reinventing the wheel. It was taking what was in front of me and how do I adapt it for my needs. And I was lucky enough because I was teaching technology and I had access to a 3D printer at that time that I could print things and just try different adaptations. And so, you know, now I can quasi fly without any modifications, some very small modifications, as long as I have my controller propped up at an angle and it's secure. I've learned how to manipulate the controls a lot more efficiently without that. But I still, on some applications, if I'm doing anything that requires tons and tons of effort and switching between functions, I'll put the adaptations back on just to be, additionally with safety, but it really boils down to efficiency as well.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. And you mentioned Rob, that there's like a therapy aspect to this, and obviously when you go out and you teach others, like whether wounded warriors or otherwise, there's a community aspect to this, and then there's a vocational kind of rehab aspect. Let's talk about vocation because it's been now several years since your accident, and um, you know we have big news, right? So this is going to be the breaking news part of the Dawn of Drones podcast. You just recently got an offer of employment for this is the first this is like your first like employment, right? Since the accident? Like official
Not
other than like
Yeah,
working with so many other groups.
yeah. So other than my vocational rehabilitation instructor position, which I left because they had discontinued the drone training program, and I wanted to follow my heart in what I felt with the technology and what it could do to increase quality of life for others. So I spent the last year, working with, nonprofits and organizations to try to advocate for other abled individuals, and just so grateful for the team at Drone Deploy because I recently just accepted a position at Drone Deploy, working with the product support team, Desiree Gregory and her team, and I really look forward to integrating within the company, learning more about Drone Deploy and what it has to offer, and really just be a contributing member to a team within the industry. Because I think that's huge. We can advocate and work, you know, remotely, and and really come up with some great solutions that not only help the community as a whole, but also I'm a voice on the inside now for other abled individuals to say this could be a career path to stick with in the drone community.
Well, congratulations, and good on Drone Deploy, and I'm so excited for what you're going to do there. Just having that ability to continue making a difference through a company, I think is going to be absolutely amazing. So you heard it first here, everybody. So
Yeah.
that's really, really cool. And we were talking about this before we went online. This is going to be maybe the one of the times you get on a commercial flight.
Yeah, so through this opportunity, there's some events that are happening at the San Francisco headquarters for Drone Deploy. So I've been asked to come visit, the headquarters and partake in the events. And in that, I've yet to in 5 years flown on a commercial aircraft with my wheelchair for any amount of time. I've been in Cessnas, locally to where a friend gets me into the cabin and my wheelchair's there when I land. So this will be the first overtaking in commercial aviation and first adventure with my wheelchair. So I'm excited for this adventure, but I'm also, I'm terrified of it because commercial aviation has a history of, from 2019 to 2020, there were over 14,000 wheelchairs that were lost, damaged, or considered completely inoperable through airline travel. And the last 2 years, from 21 to 22, it's trending even, and the numbers are trending even higher so
That
far.
is awful, Rob. I did not know that. And I mean, that's just like I can't even imagine if you were on a commercial flight and you get off and then you don't have a means to like basically to be mobile in any way because they've damaged or lost your wheelchair. I mean, wow. So I could see why you'd be worried, but yeah, so many things when you think about accessibility, not just in the drone arena, right? Just in general aviation and kind of society in general. We were talking about that before we got on here. Something that really needs to change for sure. Um, I want to talk for a second, Rob, about some of the other work you're doing. And I think, had mentioned Drone Forward, and I think it was with Drone Forward. So correct me if I'm wrong. This is a little Wayback Machine because you and I talked before Veterans Day last year for an interview. By the way, everybody, if you didn't see the article I wrote about Rob for Veterans Day, go back and check that out on DroneLife. But it was during that time that you were telling me about a really cool initiative with Skydio, and I think with Drone Forward, but I could be wrong, where there was maybe a drone giveaway or a contest.
Sure. Another organization that I kind of advise on and haven't done as much recently, but I'm still, they're in my mind. But Wounded Eagle UAS, they partnered with Skydio last year, and they also combined with the International Order of the Purple Heart Foundation, and they gave away, I want to say, 5 Skydio kits to veterans that were going to, they had to write an essay. And Mira Marquez was the kind of the brainchild on Skydio's end. Yeah, she's awesome.
I love
And
Mira. She was on the
and
podcast this time last year during Diversity Month.
yeah, and she spearheaded that, and each individual wrote essays. They would go through WeUAS's Part 107 course. They would take the Part 107, successfully pass that, and then they would write an essay to say, this is what I plan to use this drone technology for. And then the team at Skydio, ran through and graded the essays. And what I understand, it was some tough decisions, but they dispersed, I believe, 5 Skydio kits across the United States to different veterans. And, I hope that initiative continues. And I hope that US continues that partnership with Skydio to get that technology in someone's hands, especially if they're pursuing Part 107, and they want to make it a part of their career. And the biggest thing I believe sometimes is just getting equipment in people's hands and the right equipment. So yeah, hats off to Skydio for that, and hats off to Joe at WeUAS and what they're doing there. And I think he's got some news that is going to eventually break. I don't want to, but I think now that he's moved from California to Florida, I think he has some initiatives that he's been working on quietly to expand WeUAS efforts in Florida. So probably more to come in the year on that.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm sorry I messed up the organization. I was doing that completely from memory. So no shock that I messed that up. But Wounded Eagle UAS is the name of that other not-for-profit that Rob works with besides Drone Forward. And you just said the Purple Heart and Wounded Warriors. So you're out there everywhere. And Rob, you also started your own initiative. Tell us about your video initiative that you're hoping to launch later this year.
Yeah, so from the beginning, I've had this idea of a drone video project that was grassroots, and it focused on the people behind the controls. Not so much the technology is amazing, and it's going to continue to become even more amazing. But what I wanted to capture is the people behind the controls and why they fly, and their diverse and unique situation that led them to the drone community. And it's going to serve as a platform for underrepresented, underserved areas, underserved people. And in that, I feel like so far I have around 15 to 20. There's about 5 that are in and out sometimes, but pilots across the world. It's not just in the United States, and everyone has an amazing story, and some of them are other abled, some of them, women within the community, multiracial, multicultural. So I'm really excited to just start putting these videos out. And yeah, it's September. I'm going to start rolling them out one by one. Each month it'll be a new video, and it might be 30 minutes of a showcase between them flying in the environment that they work in, and then we're going to sit down and do a virtual or in-person interview and talk about what flight takes many forms means to them. And so I'm excited for it, and I've had really good response. I have enough content at this moment to start releasing it, so it's really hard for me to hold back. But I think it's going to be really eye-opening, and I think it's going to create a lot of representation within the space for so many people, that young people, old people, everyone in the industry, new and young, they're all going to learn something, I think, from each and every cast member.
No, I love that, Rob, because, speaking of Sharon Rossmark and Women in Drones, one thing she says a lot is this idea, if you can see me, you can be me. And, the idea that you're going to have now, no kidding, videos of all kinds of different people, in this industry doing amazing things, I think is so hugely important. I was telling somebody when okay, another fun fact, I wrote a book and, it was with the Unmanned Safety Institute. And I'll tell you what, Rob, it was a real challenge to find diverse photos for the book. No joke.
Yeah.
You can Google right now, and I've done my own research on this, actually, like scholarly research. Other people have studied this. The fact that you can go out there, you can Google drone pilot, and it's going to be pretty homogeneous group you're going to find that pops up. And so that was one thing I did work with Unmanned Safety Institute on. I was just like, hey, like the book with my name on it, like, of course it was before uncrewed changed. It's still called the Unmanned Aircraft System book, but I was like, I want mine to look like kind of the United Colors of Benetton in every respect, right? Like I wanted to have a diverse, because exactly that point, to show that this could be you. And what you are doing is so amazing. Where will we be able to find these videos, Rob, when they come out?
So, you mentioned Sharon Rossmark, who is absolutely amazing. Her and I had a discussion a few months back, and she she's so amazing. She's so supportive, and she offered up to host on Women in Drones. The flight takes many forms. Bios on the pilots, their footage, how to get in contact with them, and that's something that we'll roll out on Women in Drones website. It'll also be available through YouTube and, of course, probably on DFI's website as well. So those will be anything nonprofit, because the way I look at it is, in these efforts, there's so many great organizations that lobby for so many underserved, underrepresented demographics. I want to create a conduit between those nonprofits to where we're all working together for the same outcome, and that is that representation, and that is that together we can move forward. So I feel like, just anyone and everyone that wants to share, whether it be on the educational level, whether it be at the nonprofit level, it just I'm excited for it, and so I hope that all goes well, and then we can get this going. But Women in Drones has been a huge supporter and advocate to my initiatives since the beginning. So hats off to the team, and so grateful for the connections there.
Yeah, and like, since we're talking about inclusivity, of course, the for-profit crowd is very critical to all of these efforts, Rob. I mean, we just mentioned
Mhm.
Skydio, Women in Drones being another, and so many others out there that could continue supporting the work that you're doing. By the way, I wanted to kind of give a couple shout outs here. We got a handful of folks on LinkedIn. Cyril, I'm going to mess up your name, Cyril, Azubuin, says, hi, congratulations, Rob. And another user on LinkedIn says, incredible, congratulations, Rob. And so great stuff. Chris Wedgeworth is out there as well. So looking forward to, look, you've got supporters out there, you've got, video. Now, didn't you, there was a crowdfunding opportunity. Tell me about what that was about and kind of where we are with that.
So initially, I kicked off a Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign to see if I could generate some revenue. That way, we could make sure that all the cast members had appropriate equipment, to make sure that we could pay for editing services and different things throughout the project. And it was some great support in some ways, and a lot of people put eyes on it. It didn't meet funding, but that's okay, because I feel like it's all grassroots anyway, and it's collaborative between every member. So, we're going to look at every clip and say, that person has total 100 creative design over what they want to do with it. And so I think within the community of cast members, we might be able to subsidize equipment costs. We might be able to subsidize some editing and some things like that. Not that it'd be out of pocket, but I think there's enough experience there that we can work together to kind of create and meld everyone's story together. So, I'm always looking for support, always looking for any equipment support, because I do have some cast members that need some equipment. Um, Looking for any editing support is huge. So, however that comes or materializes, I'm very grateful, and I'm sure the cast would be too. But we're going to press forward regardless, and we're going to make it happen. I set it in my mind that regardless of the barriers, and I do this with pretty much everything. If you haven't got the gist yet, is we're going to make it happen regardless. So it would be nice, and it would be great for cast members to have optimal everything that they need, and or optimal editing and things. But we're gonna press forward.
Well, I know you will. And Rob, how can people, you said, you can always use this. How can they actually reach you, or do they donate through Drone Forward or some other organization, or that's getting to this particular Flight Takes Many Forms video project?
So I haven't quite established a conduit for that yet, which is
Well, we need
really lax.
to.
I know, which is really lax on my part, and I'll take the heat on that. But because I developed this out of good faith and it's so volunteer-esque, I didn't want to put any type of monetizing label on it. So I don't know. I kind of kept it that way for a reason of, if we get temporary equipment or we get some editing and things like that, that's positive. So on my, I think my link for my link tree, which is all my socials, so you can reach me on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and you can also, the link tree has an email link in there to Flight Takes Many Forms at Google or gmail.com. That's the inbox for the project. And if you want to reach out specifically for that project, hit that link in the link tree. And then if you can also reach me on other platforms as well, my Twitter, my LinkedIn.
All right, awesome. Well, look, so many amazing things coming up this year between your new gig at Drone Deploy and Flight Takes Many Forms, and this Wounded Warriors continued events that you're putting on, Rob. What else can we expect from you in 2022? Because you keep rocking it.
Yeah, so I'm still advocating, even though I'm moving into the professional space, which is going to require a different set of time. The advocacy is always going to be here, and working with these organizations is always going to be here. I would never leave those organizations or the initiatives that we've been working on in the dark. So, I always leave an open invitation, because anyone within the community, whether it's, looking at curriculum, adapting equipment, whatever kind of hurdles that you have that you feel I might be able to answer the questions, you please reach out. I'm always here as a contact to assist and push people forward in this industry. Um, and I think I'm getting to the point where it's all going to come full circle, which I think is amazing, and just so grateful for the community and these opportunities that have been presented with. So, I'm gonna leverage that until we can advocate for flight takes many forms, all groups of people.
I love that, Rob. And you mentioned kind of breaking barriers. Just to kind of give everybody context here. Again, go back, please listen to the Clubhouse replay. Lots of details on the barriers that Rob has overcome. But the Reader's Digest 30-second version is like they told him originally he was never going to be off of a feeding tube. And just to see how far you have come, to see how you've just dedicated your life in service to others to help them. It's just so incredibly inspirational. Oh, by the way, Chris Wedgeworth agrees. He says, keep up the great work, Bud. Drone people are the best. So, and it behooves all of us to include all of us. I think Rob is a perfect example of that. So we're getting close to our closing time here, Rob. I know you have a vision for a better future, and I'd love to maybe end with something from you, giving you an opportunity to kind of to let us know, like what is that vision for the future that you would love to see?
Sure. There's so many great things that have happened. I think we're moving in the right direction. And when I speak with the air mobility crowd and the urban air mobility, I've done some talks with Flight Crowd and the team there. And I believe that drones and UAM have this ability to change the narrative for so many people, where general aviation and commercial aviation had left off. When we talk about requirements and we talk about how, you know, thin line that is to become a pilot in those realms, or we talk about air transportation. So, I speak to young engineers, young drone pilots, young people in AAM, and say, like, listen to the consumers, and your consumers aren't just what you see on a day in and day out basis, right? Have the conversation with the people with disabilities, have the conversation with people from different backgrounds, cultures, wherever geographically in the world they are, and learn how you can create things more universally, because the more universal you are, if it helps me, it benefits everyone. So, that's really the biggest takeaway that I try to really send home, is that we're not reinventing a wheel, but if we include everyone, then everyone wins, and you start building barriers. That's where, we run into these roadblocks. We run into some of these niche areas where only certain people are doing certain things. And I'm all about collaboration. I'm all about everyone winning from it. So have the conversation. Research and development is huge. So make sure you're talking to other able people and you're reaching out to different demographics to develop your technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. We did mention also in Clubhouse this idea there's so much R&D going on. How much of it is involving, accessibility for all types of people? Whether at the university level or even in the FAA's Beyond program, like that would be significant, right? So thank you, Rob, for opening our eyes to some of the challenges that you and other people face on a daily basis. And thank you for your service and work to change that, not only the narrative, but the reality. So you are my hero. I've said that before, and I really mean it with all my heart. So thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. And again, thank you, Volatus, for having Rob as an Above and Beyond series guest. That's kind of all she wrote. But before we go, I do want to say tomorrow, join us on Clubhouse at 1 p.m. Eastern. We have Jamar Williams, African-American CEO of Promo Drone, doing incredible things, and just kind of hear a little bit of a different perspective of, his journey in the industry. He's also a Part 107 pilot. Jamar will join us next week on the podcast, same time, same place. So anyway, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much out here, and fly safe.